And welcome to Fixing South Sudan, your ideas for building the new nation. I am Adingor. Hello and welcome to Fixing South Sudan, your ideas for building the new nation. I am Adingor. This week on Fixing South Sudan, the country gears up for peace implementation in November. But what are the hazards and threats that stand on the way to November 12th? And with us for the show, our panelists, Peter Mayen Majongdit, to my left, representative other political parties. Marakaje Lorna, Secretary General, South Sudan Democratic Engagement, Monitoring and Observation Program, SUDEMOP, to my right, and Dr. James Okuk, Senior Research Fellow, University of Juba, and author of the new book, Peace of South Sudan and Revitalization. So a pleasure to welcome them to Fixing South Sudan to talk about the peace process. Welcome to all of you and welcome to Fixing South Sudan. And Peter Mayen, let me start with you. You are part of the peace process and you have seen some of the false starts that we have witnessed in the implementation of the agreement. The implementation has had challenges. 6 months has gone and November is when we are eyeing. What would you like to say about the pace in which the agreement is being implemented?
Thank you, and we hope that we'll always fix it. Doesn't matter with the number of the challenges and the opportunity that exists. Indeed, for every agreement, for peace process that to bring people together and establish a new path and a new vision, a new life, that have to have challenges. And we really had a number of challenges. And challenges, you could classify them to the major one, to the less one. But I would say, yes, we have challenges with areas to do with funding and areas to reach, to control all the forces together, and areas to do with training and deployment of the forces. We also have political challenges, and the political challenges also have to do with agreeing on certain statutes. However, we also have opportunities, but as per now, one would say, yes, the December have to be met for one logic reason that the country cannot get stuck. I remember...
It's an important point you're making. Peace is the only way out of this current situation. So it must be implemented, and the challenges have to be overcome.
Absolutely. And you know, also we have to understand you cannot overcome all the challenges. There are certain challenges, you have to acknowledge them, and you have to have the spirit of saying, yes, I can visit them tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. What I had means that say that we cannot really overcome all the challenges before the pre-transition period. There are certain challenges that we do believe if we have a way forward and if we could move forward, then there's a possibility of overcoming them. Because basically, for every challenge has its own ways why it is a challenge, and for every opportunity has its own opportunity why it's
Let's not be vague about this. Can you pinpoint some of the major challenges you think are impediments that must be faced head on?
One of the major challenges that we cannot control all the forces during the pre-transition period, but we could really be able to control the necessary unified forces that could be able to help us build a foundation and a way forward towards our security reforms during the transition period.
So if we look at the agreement, the chapters in the agreement, we have to zoom in on security. Security is a spoiler. It has been a spoiler before, and it can do it again. Do you think this time we know that the deadline is going, and there are challenges that you have just mentioned, logistical challenges? Do you think it is going to unravel the agreement, or it can be overcome?
They can be overcome.
Okay. Let me bring you in, Lorna Marakaje.
Thank you.
And we are talking about the agreement, and the agreement is a promise to the people of South Sudan
True.
for a better future. So what can you say? What is your assessment about how the agreement is going and whether you are hopeful?
Thank you very much. I think, first of all, I would say that the agreement between now and November, the time is very tight. If we didn't do it in the first 6 months, we didn't do it in the first 3 months of the extended pre-transitional period, then I'm asking myself, how best are we going to do it within this short time? And this question goes direct to the parties to the agreement. And the other challenge that I foresee with this agreement, which some of us saw it long ago, I think, and this is a message to people who negotiated the agreement, there are challenges right from the negotiation point where provisions that looked not palatable for the parties was signed anyway by the parties. So when it came to the implementation, it has turned out to be a bit difficult, which is still an outstanding issue. Take, for example, 10 states. I believe the parties know that it's not easy to demarcate states or state boundaries from Addis Ababa, nor can it be demarcated from Juba. But then still it was signed as part of the pre-transitional activities, which has become now a sticking issue. So I think it's quite a challenge to be able for us to be able to say that we will legitimately have government established by November 12th.
Would you say that it's better to have a bad peace than no peace at all?
I think the agreement itself, yes, I would say it's better to have bad peace than no peace at all. But then what follows after such a statement is political will. Do we have political will to implement this peace? Some people have political will. I'll speak for the National Constitution Amendment Committee, which I'm a member. The timeline for incorporation of the agreement into the transitional constitution was very tight. It was 21 days. We had to work really, really hard, extra hours, to make sure that we beat that deadline. Why? Because we had the will to make sure that the agreement is incorporated within the agreed timeline.
Right.
My challenge is to the parties and the other actors and the principals. Are they able to push and make sure that those provisions that look impossible are made possible? That's my question as a citizen.
Right, and you have heard the stack assessment from Lorna, and what is yours? She talks about political will, lack of political will from the side of the parties, and that the whole agreement is ambitious, very difficult to implement, according to her. What's your assessment?
Yeah. From the beginning, when the parties signed this revitalized agreement, I was one of those who looked at it as an ambitious project, an ambitious roadmap for a peace process in South Sudan. But also, I looked at the pre-transitional period of 8 months that was set. I look at it as a trap for the parties to show their real colors, whether they are for peace or they are for war. And I thought that these parties would have taken that trap very seriously by using all the means they have, all the resources they have to put the 8-month pre-transitional period in place. Whatever conditions were required during that preparatory period, they should have put it in place. And that would have at least diluted the doubts that these parties are not serious for a peace process in South Sudan. But yet, what did we get? It's a failed 8 months. Nothing has been achieved because the 8 month was supposed to culminate in the formation of the revitalized agreement. They failed to do that. But what did they say?
What do you think is responsible for the failure? Is it what she was talking about, lack of political will, or is it really the absence of buy-in from other partners like the international community who were supposed to have contributed money and also political support?
There were many factors, but then the behavior of the parties themselves was not in place. They didn't change the mentality that they used to pursue the war when they went for peace. That was one of the critical factors. They continue with the same old mentality. And of course, we know the result of the old mentality. You continue with it, you will still get the same consequences. And that's what we got at the end of the 8 month pre-transition period. And they look for scapegoats, usually. Rather than doing what is at your capacity, you look for a scapegoat outside, and you start to pinpoint on others. For example, you say there is no money. And when you look at what's happening in South Sudan, you can see money. So contradiction comes there. You also see, the international community is not willing to help. And when you look at what is happening in South Sudan, particularly in the humanitarian sector, the international community is paying a lot of money. Again, it is a contradiction. Then the other thing, you say, maybe the region is not serious. The IGAD is not serious. But when you look at the way the IGAD come up with the communique, they are serious with those communiques.
So excuses are being made.
So a lot of excuses, and people don't want to take the responsibility.
They should take responsibility. You have heard of the assessment of the peace agreement and the peace partners, and you are a member of the NPTC. So if this question is put forward to you, do you get a sense that there is seriousness on the side of the parties, regardless of the challenges? Still, we are going to have some kind of peace, and the government will be formed in November. What's your sense?
Absolutely right. I would say the parties have shown much seriousness. I don't want to compare, and because being one of the parties, I don't want to speak about myself, or I don't want to speak about others, but the fact still remains that the 2015 agreement was different than today. The parties have shown a major commitment. First and foremost, all the oppositions and all the parties, they are operating within Juba. Two, we just few days ago, we had witnessed a commitment from the SPLM-IO leader who came here to Juba for a visit, and he's left. That when we really were overcome by challenges, and challenges are challenges, we have to face the reality. The reality is that whatever insecurity arrangements, whatever that had been there, it was not just about today or tomorrow. It's something that we inherited from 1983 war of the SPLM, security mechanisms, approach, reforms that have never been done, and we inherited it. And then we also inherited the disasters of 2015 and 2013. So all these we have inherited, and we say that to reform the security sector in South Sudan required time, effort that cannot just be addressed during the 8 month pre-transition period. What we did is this: we still show our commitment as parties to the agreement, and when our 8 month elapsed, none of the parties wanted to extend the agreement. But we had to face the reality. The reality is that we have to buy a little bit of time so that at least we could be able to contain the necessary unified forces.
Let me ask you on what you just mentioned. Dr. Riek, the leader of the SPLM-IO, was in Juba, and you are saying that's a positive indication that the agreement is moving in the right track.
It's not just about agreement moving in the right track, but it's the commitment of the parties. He is one of the parties to the agreement. And all of us have been here. And he promised that he's going to come back. So he's being here without any problem, coming and staying in his home and going back. That's a commitment from the parties. So what we are now as parties to the agreement, we really want that despite the challenges, the obstacle that we have, then the November 12th has to be met so that the countries be able to move the country forward. And we also want a much engagement from the citizens, from the civil society, from academians, from everybody, so that we could be able to face it together. Because we cannot do it anymore.
For the implementation of the agreement to kick off, confidence building is a key ingredient. Are you seeing that as a member of the NPTC?
We all do have. Today, anyone among the parties can walk to his brothers, to his sisters. Riak can walk to Kir office, and Kir could see Riak. I can walk to anybody, and every party could do that. So this is different from the 2015 agreement, because 2015 agreement was about two army, everyone is in his court and everyone is in his court. But this agreement now, we as parties trying to relieve the responsibility from ourselves. We're trying to make it a people-driven process. We want to make it as a people ownership agreement. We also want to have a wider participation of the citizens, and that's why we, despite the fact that none of us wanted to extend the agreement, we extended the pre-transition period in order to buy time so that at least we build the confidence. A matter of necessity.
Some of the points you are raising, we are going to come back to them, and maybe let's take a break. Welcome back to Fixing South Sudan, your ideas for building the new nation. I am Adingor, and with us in the show, Peter Mayen Majongdit, representative other political parties in the RCs, Marakaje Lorna, Secretary General, South Sudan Democratic Engagement Monitoring and Observation Program, known as SUDEMO, and Dr. James Okuk, Senior Research Fellow, University of Juba, and author of the new book, Peace of South Sudan and Revitalization. And indeed, that is what we are talking about. And Marakaje Lorna, let me get you to talk about what he mentioned, the idea that this peace agreement was South Sudanese, made for South Sudanese, and the parties expressed satisfaction on the agreement. And that in itself is an indication that confidence will be achieved as a result of the fact that an agreement was made that South Sudanese parties were okay with. Is it something you agree with?
Well, thank you very much. I am very happy to hear it from Peter Mayen that this is, and he kept comparing the revitalized agreement to the previous agreement. I think that, to me as a South Sudanese citizen, that should be translated into action. And what kind of actions do we want to see? We want to see implementation. And it is good that the parties are saying that it's homegrown, it's people-driven. But then the question, for me as a civil society activist, when you say people-driven, the question is, where are people in it? Is it only the processes that are being done in the hotels, or we need to reach out to the people? And to the people, what does peace mean? Peace to ordinary citizen like me is I want to sleep in my house peacefully. I want to go to my village. Are we facilitating that? He raised a very critical issue about the security arrangements. I believe that when the parties negotiated, they knew what it takes. And that's where my dilemma is as a South Sudanese citizen, is that when it was being negotiated, we thought it was overambitious, as my brother have alluded to. But they were okay with it. And then when it came to the implementation, they were even slower than our thinking. So the question is there will? How do we get ourselves out of here? I think it's important to understand that the state at which South Sudan is requires critical thinking. We need to bring in new thinking. We cannot continue to do it as business as usual. For example, the parties went to Addis when they extended the pre-transitional period. They left out the other stakeholders, and they were very comfortable with it. I think there's a big problem with that.
I think you have raised a couple of points we have to dwell on a little bit.
Yes.
And the elephant in the room is that when he talks about 2015,
yeah.
it is peace that unraveled.
True.
And it ended up with J1
Yeah.
tobacco.
Yeah.
And looming large on every mind of a citizen
True.
is whether this peace will equally unravel because of security arrangement.
True.
What's your answer?
I am actually getting more worried because, one, if you look at 2015, what happened in 2016, it was pegged on security. Right now, we have forces coming from different groups with different orientation, and we want to rush them through a training that will take a very short time. That training, for me, the preparation of necessary unified force should be a preparation that looks at mental reorientation. And this is mental reorientation. You cannot do it in 2 weeks' time and say you have already oriented the team to be loyal to a particular direction.
Right.
I think we need to get a bit serious. If we want to do it, then it has to be a rigorous training. And then the question that we ask ourselves as citizens is that, how best can that be designed? Where is the design? Is it being done the old way, or there's new thinking? We have tried to look for that new thinking and we are not finding.
And maybe let's hear from the political analysts, what is the design? Because we want something that is workable. We are talking about fixing South Sudan. And to do it requires total peace.
Yeah.
And we have been hearing of ceasefire holding, permanent ceasefire holding, but there's some fighting here and there. In the A area and also in Mayut, Juko, some of those areas, there's infighting among the IO. So indeed, and of course, she mentioned the point of other people, other parties that have not been included in the agreement. Talk of Thomas Cirillo, renegade Thomas Cirillo, and also renegade Paul Malo, and the others who are holding out.
Yeah, I look at it differently. What you are relating are just symptoms of a bigger problem somewhere. Let's look critically of why are we in war in the first place, and who generated that war. This is a question that we should start with. Even the security sector that we are concerned about now is not running itself alone. You know, there are big people up there who are in control of the security sector. Even in 2013, when this crisis started, we know how it started. It didn't start with the common security sector. It started with the politician up there. And the whole thing melted down to the security sector. So if we want a solution, let's start where it has started. These politicians, those parties, they must be told to say it black and white.
True.
do they want to work together again after what has happened, or they don't want?
That is what they are saying. And,
Okay.
and they have been meeting
Yes.
with one another. And let me tell you an anecdote, something that I saw during the visit of the SPLM-IO leader.
Yes.
Is the bodyguards of Riek Machar hugging the bodyguards of the president. And you see that and you wonder, so was there a war, or was it really about positions?
Exactly. So we ask ourselves that question. Now, the fact that they decided to sit down, negotiate with the mediation in place, and come up with an agreement, and saying that they are ready to work together, I think their own should be all from there and said, you are the one. Nobody forced you. You were the one who sat down and said, we are going to work together through this agreement as the roadmap that we will follow. This is what we want. This agreement will not be implemented by somebody who did not negotiate it. It has to be implemented by those who negotiated. And those who negotiated are supposed to form a government that will implement that agreement. This is what we want to hear.
What about the point of inclusion that is being made, and even it was raised in the previous meeting of the so-called principals, when they met in Juba recently, they talked about they need to include others, the ones that are still fighting. What is your view on this?
I call this
is that doable?
I call this a scapegoat. Why don't you start with what you have? Why are you worried with somebody who did not sign the agreement? You should worry about the agreement that you have signed. Commit yourself as you have put it. Go ahead, and then if somebody outside that agreement comes later to try to disrupt this agreement, this is where you can start to talk. But you have not formed the government that should implement the agreement. And you start talking of somebody who is outside the agreement. Some of us will ask themselves, which is which really? Because start with what you have. Form the government. As they say they will form it in November. That's what we are saying. Do it, please.
You can
And after they have formed the government, that's where they can talk of the whole-out group. But now to start talking of the whole-out group and you have not formed the government, that is a misplaced scapegoating for me. And it's also escaping from the responsibility which should be taken. So I don't buy this idea that the whole-out group should be brought in now. It's not a priority for me now. The priority to form the government. And after that, we can talk of the whole-out group.
And let me bring in Peter Mayen. What would you say about this point of inclusivity that is being made? And the argument really is that you cannot have complete peace when there's war in other areas. And there's supposed to be peace in other areas. Is it plausible?
Thank you for that. That goes with just a simple key statement that inclusivity is not equality. And as such, that as the principals or the parties wanted the agreement to be as much as inclusivity is, doesn't mean that people will always be equal. And this probably will give you the diagrams, those who are hold out for any parties, when we call for them to join the rally for peace, so that South Sudan is embarked in a non-violence approach. We are just want them to be inclusive, but does not mean inclusivity is it's not equality. That's one of the point.
The point of equality is important to the political parties, but not to the citizens.
Absolutely.
So is it doable, or is it necessary that they are included in your view?
Okay, that brings me to answer some of the issues that have been raised up by Lorna and the rest. You know, this agreement, people have to get the diagrams of the agreement. This agreement paved ways to a total and non-violence political approach to resolve political issues through dialogues, and built on a new path that brings South Sudanese together to have a permanent constitution, and then the power gets back to the people. And with that, we have to deal with security arrangements, we have to deal with governance issues. Why we have been calling for those who have, actually they are not even whole out groups. As a matter of fact, they were with us from negotiation. They have signed several and a couple of documents, including the last document on security arrangement.
With the exception of others, like Paul
Okay,
Malone.
Paul Malone. When we signed the cessation of hostility, Paul Malone was the head of the chief or the head of the army in government here. So he should abide by the cessation of hostility. But given the fact that for anybody have every reasons, okay, we have said fine, we have to join the rally for peace. But that doesn't call, when we invite new people or when we call on new people, we'll call for new different agreements.
You are saying that this is a necessity.
A necessity
You owe the
doesn't
people
bring
of
a new
South-
agreement.
you owe the
We
people-
want everybody to embrace non-violence approach to South Sudan solutions.
Okay, and let me get the last round from all of you, and maybe I start with Lorna. And it is this point of when we talk about peace implementation, we are really talking about peace dividends. People of South Sudan have been suffering and they continue to go through enormous suffering. Will we get peace dividends? If, say, November 12th, the government is formed, is there going to be any meaningful change?
Thank you very much. I think it's a very good starting point. I want to underscore one thing, that if you have used a particular formula and it gave you an answer that was not desirable, do not go back and use the same formula and expect a different answer. What am I saying? Mine is a point of concern. The same way the parties have been doing things is how we reached this far. Can we change? Number two is that I also want to make this categorically clear and without fear of contradiction, that peace is not a mantle that you can hold and physically hand
Cannot
to
be
the
eaten.
people, cannot be eaten and cannot be touched, cannot be seen, but it has to be felt. So how do we make South Sudanese citizens to feel that peace? I'll just give one suggestion. Involve other people, those who were not part of the mess that brought us this far. Involve them in correcting it.
Bring in the new
Bring
players.
in the new players,
The
bring
youth.
in new thinking, bring in the youth, bring in the women, bring in other people, the technocrats in this country. I am one person who is living with pain because we have very qualified South Sudanese, but we are not engaging them. How are we going to move forward without involving them?
And so we say if you don't involve others who are thinking differently, not a lot is going to change.
Honestly,
in terms of service delivery.
True. Not even just service delivery to the people. Taking the country out of here, fixing South Sudan can never be done without involving other new South Sudanese thinkers and brains that have not been ordinarily involved in putting South Sudan on track. Like, for example, the agreement is heavily loaded with reform agenda.
Right.
You cannot reform with your own self.
It's quite progressive.
Thank you, quite progressive, the right language. But then you cannot have the same Lorna in the same institution who failed the institution. You bring her back again and say we are implementing the agreement. To me, as a civil society activist, then I'm like, there is no political will to see change.
Can you build on the point she raised that we are not going to have meaningful change unless the change of the players? Is that a practical thing? But also, that is a wish for us.
Partially, I agree, because it's good also to have a new outlook if you want to do a new thing. The peace agreement is supposed to do reform, and reform is supposed to bring new things, new ideas in place. There are two ways for human being, because we believe that human being can change if they want to change. They can change their behavior according to the new context, and they can do different things. Now, recycling the whole guards, if they are changing their behavior, then they can bring new results because there's a change of behavior. But recycling them with the same old mentality, you will always end up with crisis. That's given. Now, bringing new blood into the system under the reform will give you a blank page because they have not been tried before. They are coming in with just fresh page of what they want to do. And people will give them a chance to try their best.
Let me ask you
Yeah.
very quickly, since you have written about this agreement, how does the agreement fixes South Sudan?
The agreement will fix South Sudan if it is implemented in the letter and the spirit. And I have put it very clearly in this book, with the way forward in chapter 5 of this book, including the dividends you have talked about. What is facing us now is lack of the will to implement the same agreement, because this agreement is great. And I tell you, Mading, even if these parties throw it away and they go back to war and they are forced again to sit, they will come up with more or less similar document again.
True.
So what the challenge is really how to implement it. And this is where we
Implementation is the way to the peace dividends.
exactly, and that's how we will fix South Sudan. When we implement our commitment, we have committed ourselves to peace. We have committed ourselves to reforms. We have to committed ourselves to development. We have committed ourselves to democratization. I think that's what will fix South Sudan. But if we keep scapegoating and running away from the responsibility, South Sudan will remain unfixed for a longer time.
Peter Mayen, you have the last word. We talk of fixing South Sudan, we talk of peace dividends. How do we do it?
Thank you. Let me talk about fixing. I will really not talk about the new blood, the new faces and all that, but basically what I'm just going
Because
to
you're
talk
one
about,
of them.
I will talk about how we do fix South Sudan. First and foremost, we have to believe that South Sudan should, from this now on forward, we have to embrace the non-violence to resolve South Sudan solutions. That means the non-violence that calls for the fact that we have to embrace democracy and we have to create an environment. I know about the differences between, or the general opinion about the leaders and the people. We have to fix it through non-violence. We have to embrace people-driven process, people participations, and we have to believe in ourselves as South Sudanese.
And what would
we
be-
have to think big.
What would be the end goal of that? What would be in it for the people of South Sudan?
The end goal is that we are a nation of a great resilience. We are a nation that is blessed with all the resources and everything that we have. The difficult thing is that we have to understand ourselves. We have to embrace ourselves. We have to embrace the nations, and we have to think together to map the country and the future of our own country.
And I think that's a perfect way of ending this program on the peace agreement. The road to November, will it happen or not? And in the show have been our panelists, Peter Mayen Majongdit, representative other political parties, Marakaje Lorna, Secretary General, South Sudan Democratic Engagement, Monitoring and Observation Program, SUDOMO, and Dr. James Okuk, Senior Research Fellow, University of Juba, and author of the new book, Peace of South Sudan and Revitalization. Our pleasure to welcome them to Fixing South Sudan, or having them on Fixing South Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.